Dr. Claudine Bigelow is professor of viola at the Brigham Young University School of Music and holds the positions of both associate director and graduate coordinator there. She earned her bachelor and master of music degrees from Brigham Young University and her doctor of musical arts from the University of Maryland, College Park. Her teachers have included Daniel Foster, Michael Tree, and David Dalton. She has performed in Europe, the U.S., New Zealand, in the viola sections of such ensembles as the National and Utah Symphonies, Smithsonian Chamber Orchestra, and National Chamber Orchestra, and currently she performs with the Deseret String Quartet. Dr. Bigelow has served as both the host chair and the jury chair for the Primrose Competition and Festival in 2005 and 2008, respectively, and she coordinates the annual Primrose Memorial Concert. In 2012, she was chosen to be a Fulbright Senior Scholar, where she served as Artist-in-Residence at the Takoki, New Zealand School of Music in Wellington.
Dr. Bigelow enjoys expressing herself through the visual and textile arts and has made several beautiful quilts featuring famous female activists from history, some of which are on display here today. Her explorations in the visual arts have been juried into shows in the Springville Art Museum, Susan B. Anthony Birthplace Museum, Gallery 51 at the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, the SFCC Visual Arts Gallery in Santa Fe, and the William Patterson University Gallery in New Jersey. In May 2019, Dr. Bigelow traveled to Sweden to learn more about Swedish fiddle music. She spent 1 week studying at the Royal Academy of Music in Stockholm and 1 week at Lund University in southern Sweden. Back in the U.S., she participated in the BYU Church History Tour in June, during which she and dancers Bronte Hopkins and Abby Trinka performed a piece taken from her experiences in Sweden, choreographed by Dr. Keely Song. This piece is showcased in the Center for Latter-day Saint Arts in New York City and will be performed today. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Bigelow.
Oh, thank you so much. That prayer was very touching to me, and it awakened the waterworks. Usually I'm a little calmer, but today we are going to be talking about my grandmothers, and somehow that's channeled the spirit for me. Thank you very much. I thought a lot about what I could say to you that would be meaningful to you. I learned so much about music that was deeply music specific that I could tell you. I learned so much about these women that I could tell you. But I decided to talk a lot about the process and the journey experience, because I felt that that would help you as professional women. Not all of you are musicians, but I believe all of you are scholars and are in some way or another going to be engaging in projects that are important to your heart. And so I wanted to tell you the story of how I did my project in hope that that can inspire you to pursue interdisciplinary work in your scholarship. Interdisciplinary work is a beautiful experience and something that's hard to know how to approach, and it's hard to know how to do scholarship in a way that's successful, that still will work for your university. Sometimes it's looked down upon if you do too much of it, and which is unfortunate. But if you are a top-notch scholar in your discipline and also engage in some of it, then it can be very respected. It's some of the most fun work I've ever done, and so I want to inspire you and help you understand my process. The way that I started this project was actually inspired by someone else. For those of you who know Joseph Ostroff, who is in the art department, he invited me to go on this trip in the summer, a church history tour with the art department. And I took students with me to mentor. He took students. He also invited several other faculty members, including Professor Song, and who brought Bronte and Abby with her. And so I had to think, what am I going to do with scholarship on this trip? What would I have to offer? What do I want to explore? beyond taking this church history tour. And the first thing that occurred to me was music, of course. And music is my area at the university. And so I thought, how could I pursue the scholarship? And what music was happening on treks? And what people do I want to connect to as I study? And the immediate thought, of course, my heart turned to my father's, my mother's, and as the scriptures tell us, and their hearts turned to me, and I was able to explore my genealogy a little bit, and I thought about what music would my ancestors have listened to. I heard many, many stories about the women that you see pictured here. These are my grandmothers. And I heard them from my own grandmother. And this is my matriarchal line through my father's side. And Karna Olsen, Anna Anderson, and Nicolina Wilhelmina Peterson had all these stories told to me, and I didn't know if they were musical, though. The women you see before you are some of the great seamstresses of their time. They helped start the silk industry in Brigham City, Utah. And Nicolina, over here that you see on the right-hand side, she was a seamstress and had a shop, and she owned the shop in Helsingør, Denmark. And if any of you know the name Elsinore, Denmark, that is Hamlet's castle, and that is where she lived. In Danish, you say Helsingør. And so she had a staff of 23 employees, and she was most famous for her gloves. And she made the most beautiful things and some of the premier clothing that you could wear in Helsingør, Denmark. So I learned their stories and on what they did. Karna on the far left and her daughter Anna came across the plains and together, and they really had a lovely time. That's how they talk about it. Even though Anna talks about being barefoot, they were focused on coming here. So as I thought about what music would they have heard, I started reading journals and looking up music in every church history book I could find. And it turns out that music was a huge part of the Trek West. And music on the fiddle was almost a daily occurrence. And Pitt's band from Nauvoo also helped by gigging on the side as they slowly crossed the plains. William Pitt's band helped pay for all the cattle's hay on the way westward. And so music was a really critical part. Brigham Young felt it was extremely important to cheer everybody up at the end of the day. And so they would gather the wagons after a lot of hard work. They would do quadrilles and dance. And the fiddle players would play. And the fiddle was the ideal instrument to bring along because it was light and because it was actually what they were used to. So I wondered, what does Scandinavian fiddling sound like? And it sure doesn't sound like Shoot a Fly, Don't Bother Me. It does not sound like what we listened to at Pioneer Days. And so I started looking up Swedish fiddle music and finding that it was very difficult to find. I found some beautiful videos and some Swedish people that did it. So I turned to my colleagues that I'd met at a number of international viola congresses, Henrik Frenden and Håkan Olsen. I have attended the conferences in my discipline for many, many years, and so Now, these people had become old friends, so I asked Henrik, who teaches at Lund University, if I could go study with him and learn how to play Swedish fiddle music, because I've heard him do it at these international conferences. And he said, Claudine, I would love to do this for you, but you need to study with the best fiddlers, Swedish fiddlers in the world. And I'm a good one, but my best friends are the best ones. So you should come study with Mikael Marin, and who's at the Royal Academy of Music in Stockholm, and Mats Edén. Let me give you, let me exit this for just a little minute. I wanted to show you some examples of their playing. Okay. Oh, is this going to sound? How come it's not sounding very well? I wonder. Well, it's okay. Here you can see. That's all right. You can see that there are some unusual instruments here. Do you see that? That's a nickel harpa that they're playing. And it's like not loaded or something, or would it, if I, can you check your permissions really fast? Maybe that's the problem. Yeah, sure, you can check that. You know what? I only meant to play a snippet, so we're good. We're good. It's all right. So here you can see some of what I was exposed to with these different instruments, with the and that was my teacher who was playing. And here's another picture of my teacher, the other teacher. This is Mats Edén, and he's playing the fiddle. And I'm going to go back to this. And I went to go study with them. And when I got there, I asked them, how come it's so hard to find how to play Swedish fiddle music? And it's because it's an oral tradition, and it still is. And their generation is slowly but carefully putting that all on a website that is completely in Swedish. And so I absolutely had to go there to learn how to study it. I also went to Iceland to study at the Folk Music Information Center in Siglufjordur, Iceland, to look at more Scandinavian style music that was specific to the largest Icelandic group of people that settled in the United States. In fact, the very first immigrants from Iceland went to Spanish Fork, Utah. So I went to Spanish Fork, I went to Iceland Days to prepare, and I also went to this place to look at Icelandic music. And here you can see I took picture after picture of all the slides to create further references for me to be able to study in Swedish and have the right search words. If I have the right words, then I can go to the right place, and I can figure out how to translate, and I can find some of the notation. And I learned much better how to do the research in Swedish. So how did I get over there? I had to apply for grants. I applied for many grants. And so one of the ways that you need to really refine yourself is get good at grant writing. She talked about how you need to go on this cool trip to Britain. Find the ways that you can get funded and apply and write a really good application. Have a friend proofread it. Make sure you have topic sentences so they know exactly what you propose to do. Really pay attention to the details, and you can get funding. Generously funded to do this by the Kennedy Center, by the Women's Studies, and by the Laycock interdisciplinary grants that are offered in the College of Fine Arts and Communications. And so I went many places. It cost a lot of money to go. It cost actually much more than I even thought that it would. And I am so grateful for the support that I received and the help that I got to do this research. I also went all over. When I wasn't taking lessons, I would go have a lesson every day with one of these teachers. And we would sometimes meet for 2 hours. Sometimes we would meet for 4 hours. I had contracted them. I actually paid them a lesson fee that they would teach me an hour a day. And they would teach me between 2 and 4 hours a day. And they were so generous with me and so excited that I was interested in what they were doing. And then in the time off, I absolutely embedded myself in the culture around me so that I could understand the world of my grandmothers and look to the past. I went to art museums. I visited many, many churches. And in fact, I got to go to the church in Helsingør, in Denmark, and I asked a lot of questions as I received tours. This was the only church in that town at the time that my grandmother was there. So while I don't have evidence that this is the church she attended, I can assume it might have, and it would likely have been the church that she attended. And I was able to go in and see it. I was able to go to a textile exhibit. I'm very interested in textiles. And it turns out this textile exhibit was all about how good Scandinavians are at the silk industry. And they showed the history of the silk industry in Scandinavia. And so I felt really connected to understanding and being taught the knowledge that my grandmothers knew to start the silk industry in Brigham City. And there's some of the clothing that was made. I thought that was really interesting. And they had textiles from every period. So I immersed myself in the culture around me. So I got back from Sweden, and I went on the church history tour. And so here you see representatives from the faculty on design and film, art, and dance, and some of the students that we also took from each one of those areas. And so I told my story to them as we drove across the United States. We drove all the way to New York and back. So I was in the car with these people for a very long time. And I was able to go into depth and detail about the stories of my grandmothers, about the meaningful experiences I had and what I learned, and played a lot of my music for the dance faculty. And as we were driving, we shared stories and had ideas, and Keely choreographed this work, and Bronte and Abby interpreted it. And we would, this is South Pass. This previous one, that's Martin's Cove. And we had spiritual experiences. We shared our testimonies. We talked about art. We talked about what it meant to be artists. We shared our hearts with each other and our stories. And we also made a film that of this work. And so I wanted to invite Abby and Bronte to collaborate with me and show you what we came up with. We decided not to create something with women in pioneer dresses. So I'm going to be playing a Scandinavian tune. It's a waltz by Lasse and Leiby. That was one of the very first things that Mikael Moran taught me. And they are going to be dancing the feelings of pioneer women and of the stories that I told them about my grandmothers. And we'll see how you feel about it. Okay, so we'll... So that features a collaboration between faculty and students as well. And I want to encourage you as you look to your future in scholarship and as you think about now, to see collaborations between faculty and students as possible. And that mentoring is a wonderful experience in both directions. And this collaboration is something that I will cherish for forever. So one of the other outcomes of my trip to Sweden was some art. And I was able to make this piece and submitted it, and it was accepted to be shown in a gallery in Santa Fe. And I don't have the real one with me because it's still in Santa Fe. But as I was thinking through my experiences, I kept thinking about my roots, and that's what this is called. And so what I did was take an antique map of Sweden, of Stockholm, Sweden, and quilt many of the roads that I found that are still there and that I loved. And so this is an abstraction of Stockholm. This is Iceland. And Iceland was amazing. And the nature was amazing. And this I went to the northernmost tip of Iceland, and my purposes in Iceland were dual. I went partly for this project, and so for the first week, and the second week of that, well, actually it was 10 days of that project. The second week of that project was art specific again, and I collaborated with the art department, doing something different. But the first part of the trip, I went to the very northernmost tip, and in fact, one of our guides there took us to the coast and said, look out at the ocean. This is as far to the North Pole as you're going to get before you get, to the North Pole. So it felt like being on top of the world. And I went to this folk music information center, and it turns out it was a house. And it was the house of the pastor of the church from the last century, who was passionate as Bela Bartok about collecting folk music. And so he had saved many hundreds of tunes. And what I didn't understand before I went was that there actually aren't very many people who can play these instruments, and that this is a tradition that is not as alive and well as in Sweden, and they don't still do it a lot. But I was able to play this instrument and learn how to play it, and I was able to learn a great deal about the vocal tradition, which is still very much alive. And I was able to, again, learn a lot about the culture and the textiles, the sheep and the yarn, and all of those things greatly inspired me. It was really amazing. And I guess I'll just leave it here. And so I'm still working on the outcomes of this. I just got back in August, and so I've had a couple of months to process all of these things. I still have one more dance to create that I'm going to collaborate on with Kate Monson, another member of the dance faculty. And so I wanted to tell you about the outcomes, and there were some surprises along the way. There always are. So I learned a lot about my grandmothers. I learned a lot about the music, and as I told you. But then there's the scholarship part of it. I have to. I'm going to give some performances, as I have now. We made a film that we're going to submit. There's going to be an art show, which I will make sure to tell women's studies about, that reflects the church history tour when the films of some of the other artists that were separate and not related projects are done. That will be on display. And I've also been invited to do 2 surprise things. The American Viola Society has asked me to come give a concert of Swedish music, which I will do in June. And so this project has ballooned into something else that's wonderful for me. And that's part of what's great about interdisciplinary collaboration, is that it seems to lead to other things and more things. And while I was in Nauvoo, we just happened to meet a member of the church history department who followed up and later met with me just a month ago, and he's invited me to create the source document of music for Nauvoo. They're going to make it more like Williamsburg, where they have period-appropriate material, and to make it accurate. And they've asked if I would please prepare the document for the Scandinavian fiddling that they would like to be performed in Nauvoo. And they want it for the British Isles and Scotland and Ireland as well. And so I may have to make another trip and learn how to do those things on my viola as well. So the scholarship opportunities have been very rich for me, and I think will be ongoing for the next couple of years. And so I'm very, very grateful for these opportunities. So I wanted to, I guess, end again by encouraging you with regard to interdisciplinary collaboration and to see its possibilities, and to find, if you find a friend in another discipline and you can find ways to make those things connect, I think you can have really beautiful experiences, and it may stretch you and it may be challenging for you. But I never ever thought that I would create fine art, which I have all my life, but I never thought that it would be on display in galleries. And that's started happening all the time with the help of my colleagues. And I never thought that I would collaborate so much with dancers, and that's happening all the time. I'm very grateful for it. So I'm going to end by playing for you a piece of Swedish music that I learned from Mats Hedén. It's composed by him, but it is directly coming from the Swedish fiddling tradition, and it's very different. It's very, very different. One of the things that I learned in Sweden was how much they use scordatura in their playing. So scordatura is something I had always considered an antique tradition, something from the Baroque period that was rarely done. And in Sweden, for their fiddle music, they do it all the time. They change the tuning of their instruments. Probably at least 20 pieces with 20 different tunings. And it blew my mind. It was absolutely crazy to do this. But now I've learned how to do it with his instruction and help. So I'm going to share with you this piece called Arpeggio to close, and then I'll invite your questions afterwards.
We're very grateful to Dr. Bigelow and to the dancers and their instructor for their wonderful performances today. A lot of times in life, we are taught that the parts of our lives do not go together, that we have to choose between the various aspects of who we are in order to be successful. Sometimes we are taught that so much of life is diametrically opposed, the old versus the young, the musical versus the scientific, the artistic versus the technical. But truly what Dr. Bigelow has shown us is that the true path to success in life is through weaving everything together. Both in her artistic work and in her professional life, Dr. Bigelow has exemplified how it all fits together in one greater whole. She has shown us how music and art, dance and family history, past and present, faculty and students can work together as one, how tensions can be resolved and how connections can be built. And this is the work of Global Women's Studies, to bring our world together as we understand diverse experiences in diverse places, in diverse lives, remembering that we are one human family with a broader narrative to tell. We are grateful to Dr. Bigelow for her work, for her commitment to interdisciplinary scholarship, and her commitment to engaging with the person she really is, so that we may follow her inspiring example. Thank you, Dr. Bigelow.
Thank you for that response. And thank you, Dr. Bigelow, for your wonderful presentation and for your performance. We will now, I will begin the question and answer section of our colloquium today. And after Dr. Bigelow, or after I ask my question, we'll invite Dr. Bigelow to come up and respond, and then we'll invite all of you to come up to the microphone to ask your questions as well. So my question, I was really interested in the fiddling, and it is so different from what we kind of consider traditional fiddling. And so I was wondering if you could tell us more about what constitutes fiddling and how this fiddling relates to what we would normally think of as fiddling, and kind of what context this kind of music was used. Was it used for dancing the same way that I guess the American kind of fiddling is used?
Okay, so I think the kind of fiddling that we're used to is American as inspired by Celtic fiddling, English and Irish and some Scottish as well. And you can feel those influences in Swedish fiddling. What's very interesting is I think this is music of the people, and they create it where they're coming from and with what they have. So what I learned in Sweden, I wish we had all the time in the world. I could spend a whole semester teaching you about this, but every person that I met showed me 5 to 8 different instruments that they had. And I'm not used to that. I have one. And so that shows me culturally and how I think about, and I am more focused in my discipline this way, and they do this. And so Mats Daen showed me his Norwegian fiddle, his Hardanger fiddle, which is also different, and it sounds different because you start capitalizing on what makes it sound its best way. It has all these sympathetic strings, and then they had, as you saw, the nyckelharpa, the keyed fiddle, and it had all those strange keys, and you were bowing it that way, and so I think their tradition comes from all the different types of instruments they have, and the types of sounds that they make, and the virtuosos who developed those sounds to make them sound as beautiful as they could be. And that's what makes it sound really different than what we're used to. I think they also love and treasure their tradition, so they keep it alive. And in Iceland, I think they love their tradition, but it's been lost. And so I got to see how they handled the memory of it differently. And I think part of that has to do with the hardships the Icelanders were dealing with, and they were focusing on very important and different things. And sometimes they were starving in ways that they didn't have the same lives of privilege. Fiddling is still done at midsummer all the time in Sweden. It's a very important tradition. And the fiddler gets out, and they kind of have a percussion section with their feet when they're playing. And it's, I have been taught all my life not to tap my feet when I play. And so they would keep saying, tap your foot, and it was the opposite of what I had been traditionally asked to do. But they actually wear hard shoes so that you can feel the beat. And they, something that's also different about their fiddling is they feel their beat differently. Just like their language has a sing-song kind of feeling, so does their music. So they, whereas in Celtic fiddling, I might feel 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In Sweden, I would hear. And they also, in their fiddling, they have this quality that I have been taught to iron out in my playing. And so they would always tell me, it's too clean, it's too precise, it's not, it needs to and so they bow like this. So they have these kind of lunging sounds in there, and that is correct for them. And culturally, that is incorrect for the Germanic classical music that I have learned to play. So I learned to acquire, and my people in my discipline have challenged me, this is going to ruin your playing to learn how to do this. And I say it's given me more tools. I've learned a different language. I have more languages. And I don't feel highbrow about it a bit. I don't think it's hurt my playing for a minute. I love it. So that is a very short answer about a very big topic. And I would love to show you more and would love to. If you look up Väsen, V-A-S-E-N, look at that music group, and that will really expose you to some of the Swedish fiddling, and you can really enjoy that. Any other questions?
Okay, we know that some of you have classes, so if you need to leave to go to another class, we just ask that you do so quietly. And if anyone else would like to stay for a little bit longer and ask your questions at the microphone, please feel free to do so.
So I was wondering, do you speak Swedish?
I don't speak Swedish.
Okay, so did that make it like really difficult because you said a lot of their music is like oral and a lot of it is like not available online. Did that make it difficult to find music because you don't speak the language?
It made it difficult to find music, and it made it difficult, but it's hard to find anyway. Even if I knew Swedish, it would be hard to find. But it also made it difficult because the kind of learner that I am. I'm used to reading music and practicing it a great deal and then responding. And so when I would go to lessons, they would play a long line of notes and say, okay, play it back to me. And I had never done that before. So that was a very huge learning curve to be absorbing what the language sounded like and to give it back at the same time. But at the end of 2 weeks, I got a lot better at it, but I felt very slow at first.
I have a question.
Sure.
Could you talk about the way that you think this music connects with your grandmothers and with the women who were leaving Scandinavia and crossing the plains to come here? And I'll maybe relate it to the dance, because I'm interested in what emotions were being portrayed in the dance and what was going on there.
Okay.
Maybe one of you wants to answer too. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the other things that I studied while I was there and purchased were folk song books with nursery rhymes and so on. I was interested in finding the Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. You know, we all know that, right? And we don't even know how we know that, but we know it. And we know Mary had a little lamb. And I wanted to find those equivalents to 1850. And what were the nursery rhymes, stories, songs, and so on. So the piece that I played for you for that dance would have been one of those songs. So that would have been, that tune would have been from southern Sweden from 1850, and everybody would have known it. And the teachers taught me those pieces purposely because they knew that they would have meaning and connection, and my grandmothers were sure to have known it. Okay? And how does that relate to the emotions? Bronte, would you like to answer?
I guess you kind of feel funny when you're performing because so many people have questions and it's not spoken word, it's not the written song, and so it doesn't have some kinds a translation that you can understand. And when we were creating this piece that myself and Abby did, we didn't anticipate. We actually performed it everywhere that we went on the trip, and we performed it on every terrain you can think, including the edge of a waterfall. We performed it in a river. We performed it in a grassy plain. We performed it in a desert. We performed it in a swamp. And there was this conversation about the struggle that these pioneer women went through and the conflicts that they faced along the way, and even the choices that some of them made to not continue on to Salt Lake. And just trying to honor that struggle that they experienced. And we didn't feel like we needed to be in their traditional wear. We felt like that's a conversation that we can also relate to. And it was interesting to perform it in all of those different terrains and see all the different technical difficulties, but we actually could feel very much an internal, that performance became like a prayer for us. It became something we did daily. It became something that we internalized, and therefore our research was based in our bodies as our habitat. And so as we experienced that over that trip, and we traveled for 9 hours sometimes a day in a van, we kind of felt to embody the spirit of that trip in our own manner, being now in 2019. So just a little bit.
Any more questions?
All right, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you especially to Abby and Bronte for that beautiful dance and for that explanation that really deepened my understanding of how that comes together. So thank you so much, everyone.